Today I'm sharing with you a German bread that is made in only one town in Germany. These are called Mutschel. These intricate star-shaped breads have a whole day dedicated to them, the Thursday following Epiphany or January 6th. On this day in Reutlingen, Germany, people play dice games to win parts or whole Mutschel. So join me today as I show you how to make this bread, as well as share with you its 800-year-old history, and I'll even teach you how to play a dice game to go with it. Let's get started. First, begin by putting 200 milliliters or a scant 1 cup of lukewarm whole milk in the bowl of a stand mixer with 1 teaspoon of sugar and 10 grams of instant yeast. Or you can check the printable recipe below for other types of yeast and their measurements. Give that a quick stir and then let that sit for a couple of minutes to let the yeast bloom. And you're going to add a total of 200 grams of softened butter. Add half of that to the mixture now and put the rest aside for later. Then pour in 1,000 grams or 8 cups of all-purpose flour and 20 grams or 3.5 teaspoons of salt. Let that knead together until it forms a smooth dough. I couldn't figure out why the mixture was so dry until I realized that I had forgotten to add 200 milliliters or a scant 1 cup of lukewarm water. You'll want to add that at the beginning with the milk. And as with any bread recipe, if you find that your dough is too dry, you can add in a tablespoon of water at a time until your dough comes together. And you can do the opposite if you find that your dough is too wet by adding in a tablespoon of flour at a time until you reach the right consistency. Once your dough starts to come together, begin adding in the rest of your butter, a cube or 2 at a time, waiting for each addition to be incorporated before adding the next one. You're going to knead the dough on medium speed for 7 to 10 minutes or until it passes the window pane test, which is where you stretch a small section of dough, and if it doesn't rip and you can see light through it, then the gluten has properly developed. Now place your dough in a covered bowl in a warm area for 45 minutes to an hour or until it has doubled in size. Once it has doubled, punch down the dough, and then you're going to be making 10 good-sized Mutschel. You'll weigh out 10 150-gram balls of dough, and you'll have an 11th small piece of dough left over. You'll want to wrap that in plastic wrap and set it aside. As you weigh out each ball of dough, go ahead and put those pieces of dough underneath a piece of plastic wrap so that they don't dry out while you're measuring out the rest. Then you're going to form each 150-gram piece into a ball by bringing all the edges inward and pinching them, and then rolling the ball under your hand seam side down. This will help to shape as well as seal the seam on the bottom. Make sure to work on a flourless surface because you need that little bit of extra tension for shaping. As you shape them, place them back under the plastic wrap so that they don't dry out. This bread likely dates back to the 13th century, and there are several theories about what it represents. I think the most likely explanation is that it represents the Star of Bethlehem, since the bread is always made for the first Thursday after Epiphany, which is the day the Western Church celebrates the 3 kings visiting the baby Jesus. Another explanation is that the raised square in the middle of the bread represents the castle on the Acham, a hill next to Reutlingen, and that the 8 points of the star represent medieval guilds. The word Mutschel comes from the Middle High German word Mutscheln. Mutsche, or the diminutive Mutschel, used to refer to a failed loaf of bread or a bread made from leftover dough, and a baker who often baked unsuccessful bread was called a Mutschelbeck. The neighboring town of Reutlingen has a similar star-shaped bread with 7 points instead of 8. This bread is simply called Stern, which is the German word for star. Don't make the mistake of calling the Reutlingen Stern a Mutschel, though. as this could be considered offensive because Reutlingen and Reutlingen have an old and deep rivalry. Then put a sheet of parchment on 3 baking sheets. About 3 to 4 Mutschel will fit on 1 baking sheet. You're going to cut a square on the top of each ball of dough. A serrated knife or a bread lame will work for this. I wish I had a sharp bread lame because I had to be careful not to let my knife drag through the dough. If you let the dough drag with the knife, you won't end up with a clean, crisp shape. Then around the square that you cut, push the dough down to allow the square to rise above the rest of the dough. Then with the pastry cutter, cut 8 sections to make an 8-pointed star. Pinch the end of each section to make a point. Now take that leftover piece of dough and divide it into 10 pieces. Roll each piece into a long snake and then fold it in half and twist it over itself. Pinch the ends together and feed them through the top loop and place that around the square of dough. Then cover them and let them rise for about 30 minutes and then brush them with 1 egg whisked with a splash of milk. And you're going to preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius, and then lower the temperature to 400 Fahrenheit or 200 Celsius when you put them in the oven. And then you're going to bake them for 15 to 20 minutes or until golden brown, and then let them cool on a rack. While the bread is cooling, I'll teach you one of the traditional dice games played on Mutschel Day. It's called House Number, and you can play either the big or the small version. We're playing the small version, so the point of the game is to get the smallest address or house number. You roll 3 dice at a time, and you put the numbers you roll in the order that will make them the smallest house number. So if you roll a 6, a 4, and a 2, to make the smallest number, you put the 6 in the ones place, the 4 in the tens place, and the 2 in the hundreds place. You each roll 3 times, and then the winner is the one who has the smallest house number. Now let's see how that beautiful bread turned out. I had so much fun making this video because I'm enamored by cultural traditions like this. A bread that's been made for 8 centuries, that has a whole day dedicated to it, and even community events surrounding it. It's just so cool. So let's give this a try. Well, it tastes like a white bread roll. I imagine if I were in the 1200s, this would knock me off my feet if I were used to eating whole grain heavy breads every day. But in 2024, this is good, but nothing special. It is a good quality bread roll though. It has a crunchy outer crust and a soft but dense interior, and it has a good flavor from the butter and the milk. The texture of it reminds me a little bit of a pretzel. I do hope you'll try this recipe, if not for the bread, but what a fun party this would be to have friends over to play dice games to win a pretty baked good. If you want more bread recipes, check out my bread playlist here, and I will see you next time.